Hari Om. Our today's session is on life sketches and teachings of yoga masters. India had many great philosophers, thinkers, and yogis in every century since Vedic period. These philosophers, they studied human life in depth and gave solid foundation for the thought process considering the meaning and purpose of human life. Particularly in 18th and 19th century, the thinkers studied the sacred writings in Vedas, Upanishads, and Bhagavad Gita and passed the main values to the common man. These philosophers advocated that the householders should follow Vedic lifestyle. Until this time, it was believed that following Vedic lifestyle is the domain of sannyasis only. But these philosophers, they asserted that Vedic lifestyle can be followed and should be followed rather by the households as well. These thinkers were instrumental in making the common man aware of the knowledge of Vedas, Upanishads, and Bhagavad Gita. They spread this knowledge throughout the world and brought fame and status to India. Today we will be discussing the life sketches and teachings of four philosophers and yogis: Swami Dayananda Saraswati, Swami Vivekananda, Yogi Arvind, and Bhagwan Shri Raman Maharshi. We will be discussing the life sketch and the teachings of these four philosophers in the order of their period. And so the first philosopher and yogi, the life sketch of whom we are going to discuss, is Swami Dayananda Saraswati. His period is between 12th February 1824 to 30th October 1883. He was, apart from philosopher, he was a social leader and founder of Arya Samaj, which is working even today. He was the first to give call for freedom, Swarajya, as India for Indians in 1876. He also worked for revival of Vedic ideologies. Dr. Sarvapalli Radhakrishnan called him one of the makers of modern India. He was born on 12th February 1824 in a small village Tankara, presently in Gujarat. He was named as Mula Shankar by his father Karsanji Lalji Kapdi and mother Amrutabai. At a very early age, the death of his uncle and younger sister led Mula Shankar to think and ponder the meaning of life and death. He started asking many questions to his parents, which worried them, and they decided that he should get married. But Mula Shankar decided that marriage was not for him and ran away from home in 1846. Long 25 years, he spent his life as wandering monk, parivrajak, searching for religious truth. During this time, he denied all material goods and devoted his life in pursuit of spiritual enlightenment. He lived in forests, in Himalayan mountains, and visited many pilgrimage sites in North India. During these years, he practiced various forms of yoga and became a disciple of a religious teacher, Virajananda Dandisha. His master, his guru, Virajananda Dandisha, gave him the name Dayananda Saraswati. Dayananda Saraswati promised his guru that he would devote his life to resorting the rightful place of Vedas in Hindu faith. This restoring of Vedas in Hindu faith was particularly of great importance during that time. Dayananda Saraswati accepted the authority of Vedas in human life and announced, "Go back to Vedas." For this mission, he founded Arya Samaj on 10th April 1875 in Mumbai with the main objective of awareness and spread of Vedic knowledge. The next step for him was to reform Hinduism with a new dedication to God. For this mission, he traveled all through the country, challenging various religious scholars and priests, winning repeatedly through the strength of arguments and knowledge of Sanskrit and Vedas. He appealed people to reject superstitious notions. His aim was to educate the nation to the teachings of Vedas and follow the Vedic way of life. He made critical analysis of other faiths, including Islam, Jain, Christian, etc. He defined Dharma, and according to him, Dharma is impartial justice, truthfulness. And he said, even Vedas accept this definition. His Vedic message emphasized respect for other human beings, supported by Vedic notion of divine nature of the individual. He asserted all actions should be performed with the prime objective of benefiting mankind. He gave 10 principles, of which first 5 speak of truth, while the last 5 speak of society with nobility, civics, co-living, and disciplined life. According to him, moksha is a lower calling, as it benefits the individual rather than calling to the benefit of mankind. His message, "Go back to Vedas," influenced many thinkers and philosophers world over. His teachings mainly include: do yoga studies religiously and every day and follow yogic lifestyle. He strongly believed to educate women and particularly authorize them to gain knowledge of Vedas. He motivated Indians to fight for freedom. Dayananda Saraswati was active since he was 14, when he was able to recite religious verses and teach them to others. His writings include more than 60 books, 16 volumes explaining 4 Vedas. His commentary on Panini's grammar is famous even today and studied. Several small books he wrote on ethics and morality, Vedic rituals, and analysis of Advaita philosophy. Some of his major work includes Satyartha Prakash, Satyartha Bhumika, Rigveda Bhashya. These are the most studied and researched books. As he opposed and as he argued with many scholars and pandits of that time, he had many enemies. In 1883, the Maharaja of Jodhpur, Jaswant Singh, invited him to stay at the palace. During his stay, a dancer in the palace on 29 September 1883, bribed his cook to make small pieces of glass in the milk before bed, which he drank and made him bedridden for several days. On October 26, 1883, he was sent to Ajmer. He was sent to Ajmer for better medical care. But he died on the morning of Hindu festival Diwali on 30th October 1883, chanting mantras. Swami Dayananda Saraswati was ahead of time, and he was the first to give a call for freedom for Indians. He was a philosopher, but more so, he was a social leader. The next philosopher and yogi that we will be discussing is Swami Vivekananda. His period is from 12th January 1863 to 4th July 1902. Most of us, we know Swami Vivekananda, and even today, we read a lot about Swami Vivekananda and what he has written. He was an Indian Hindu monk and a chief disciple of Sri Ramkrishna Paramahamsa, a Hindu mystic of 19th century. He was a key figure in introducing Indian philosophies of Vedanta and Yoga to the Western world. He is best known for his speech at the Parliament of the World's Religions in Chicago, with its beginning words, Sisters and Brothers of America. He was born on 12 January 1863 and was named as Narendra by his father Vishwanath Datta and mother Bhuvaneshwari Devi. He was born in an aristocratic Bengali family of Calcutta, British India, represented today by Kolkata. Since childhood, he was inclined to spirituality. He used to meditate before the image of deities such as Shiva, Ram, Hanuman. He was educated in Presidency College and was also interested in Indian classical music. He was interested in Indian scriptures and was a vivid reader with a wide range of subjects, including philosophy, religion, history, social science, art and literature. In 1881, Narendra first met Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, who became his spiritual master. This first meeting proved to be a turning point in Narendra's life. In 1886, Narendra and other 8 disciples took formal monastic vows. They decided to live their lives as their master lived. Narendra took the name Swami Vivekananda. Vivekananda means the bliss of discerning wisdom. In 1883, Narendra left monastery as wandering monk. He travelled extensively in India for 5 years, visiting centers of learning and acquainting himself with diverse religious traditions and social patterns. At Kanyakumari in meditation, he got enlightenment, and after that, he followed Karmayoga throughout his life. He started his journey to the West on 31st May 1893 and after visiting several countries, reached Chicago on 30th July 1893. He participated in the Parliament of Religions, which took place in September 1893. He gave a brave speech representing India and Hinduism. He began his speech with the words Sisters and Brothers of America, on which he received standing ovation from the crowd of 7,000. Then after, he extensively traveled America for 2 years giving speeches. In 1896, he founded Vedanta Society of New York. He advocated Advaita philosophy in his speeches. He toured in UK and USA and attracted followers and admirers. He came back in India on 15 January 1893 and was given a warm welcome. His second visit to West was from 1899 to 1902. His teachings and philosophy includes his definition of dharma. He defined dharma as manifestation of divinity already in man. He believed each soul is potentially divine. According to him, rituals, temples, books are but of secondary details. He believed that the future of a country depends on its people, and his teachings focused on human development. He advised his followers to be holy, unselfish, and to have faith. He advocated 4 paths of yoga: Karmayoga, Jnana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, and Raja Yoga. However, he said that the ultimate goal of all these paths is the same: self-realization. But every individual must have a choice to choose his own way depending on his capability, interest, and inclination. Whatever path one chooses, one should follow that path sincerely and with conviction. He was a strong advocate of Advaita philosophy and had accepted Vedic philosophy. He believed in rationality and rejected superstition. According to him, the main objective of yoga is to help the practitioner concentrate on one path so that the goal of self-realization can be attained. According to him, true yogi is embedded with karma, jnana, and bhakti. Swami Vivekananda was a spiritual leader who attempted to combine Indian spirituality with Western material progress, maintaining that the two supplemented and complemented with each other. His appeal to people was arise, awake, and do not stop until the goal is reached. He said, you have to grow from the inside out. None can teach you, none can make you spiritual. There is no other teacher but your own soul. Swami Vivekananda was successful in constructing a virtual bridge between the culture of East and West. He interpreted the Hindu scriptures, philosophy, and the way of life to the Western people. He played a key role in ending India's cultural isolation from the rest of the world. His message was, take up one idea, make that one idea your life, dream of it, think of it, live with that idea. Let the brain, the body, muscles, nerves, every part of your body be full of that idea and just leave every other idea alone. This is the way to success, and this is the way great spiritual giants are produced. Swami Vivekananda described Karmayoga as a mental discipline that allows a person to carry out her duties as a service to the entire world, as a path to enlightenment. Karmayoga is the path of unselfish action. It teaches that a spiritual seeker should act according to dharma without being attached to the fruits of personal consequences. Swami Vivekananda believed Karma Yoga purifies the mind. After Ramakrishna's death, Vivekananda decided to convert a house at Barangar into a new matha monastery for disciples. This became the first building of Ramkrishna Mission. The Ramakrishna Mission, the mission of this organization is to spread Vedic knowledge. This mission was established on 1st May 1897, and today, world over, Ramakrishna Mission's work is going on. His writings. In his lifetime, he wrote Sangeeta Kalpataru, Karma Yoga, Raja Yoga, Vedanta Philosophy, My Master, and many other books, which are mainly compilation of his lectures published after his death by the mission. Swami Vivekananda took Mahasamadhi on 4th July 1902 at Belur Mutt. So Swami Vivekananda was the first spiritual leader from India to visit the Western world and introduce the knowledge of Vedas, Upanishads and Bhagavad Gita to the world. After Swami Vivekananda, we will be discussing the teachings of Mahayogi Sri Aurobindo. Mahayogi Sri Aurobindo was an Indian philosopher, yogi, poet and nationalist. He was one of the influential leaders in Indian freedom movement. Then he became a spiritual reformer, introducing his vision on human progress and spiritual evolution. He put forth a philosophy of divine life on earth through spiritual evolution. He was born in Calcutta on 15th August 1872 in Konnagar village in a Bengali family. His father was Krishnadhan Ghosh and mother Swarnalata Devi. He had two elder brothers and one younger sister and a younger brother. He and his two elder siblings were sent to a boarding school in Darjeeling as his father wanted his sons to be in Indian civil services. To achieve this, the three brothers were sent later on to England in 1879 and Sri Aurobindo stayed there for 14 years till 1893. He studied at King's College, England. In the beginning, their father was sending them enough money to survive. But later on, when their father experienced financial difficulties, the three brothers began living in Spartan circumstances during 1887 at the Liberal Club. He passed written examination, being ranked 11th out of 250 students. But as he had no interest in ICS, he came late for horse riding practical examination purposefully to get himself disqualified for the service. At the same time, Maharaja of Baroda, Sayajirao Gaikwad, was travelling to England and he recognized the spark in Aurobindo and brought him to Baroda in 1896 at the age of 21 on a salary of 250 rupees. This was the period when Aurobindo became a nationalist, a freedom fighter. He contributed many articles on Indian freedom in Hindu Prakash, a magazine, during his stay in Baroda. He started taking active interest in the politics of India's independence struggle against British rule. Aurobindo attended Congress meeting in 1901. He was arrested in May 1908 in connection with the Alipur bomb case. He was subsequently released after 1 year. Once out of prison, he started new publications, Karmayoga in English and Dharma in Bengali. The British prosecution continued because of his writings, and in April 1910, he moved to Pondicherry to avoid these prosecutions. His journey from politics to spirituality is a very exciting journey. He says that during Alipur jail, his view of life changed radically due to spiritual experiences and realizations. In his autobiography, he says he felt a vast sense of calmness when he came back to India. He could not explain this and continued to get spiritual experiences from time to time. During this time, he knew nothing about yoga and started his practice without teacher, but learned some rules from a friend who was a disciple of Swami Brahmananda. In 1907, he was introduced to Vishnu Bhaskar Lele, a Maharashtrian yogi. Aurobindo was influenced by the guidance he got from the yogi, who instructed Aurobindo to depend on inner guide. In 1910, he withdrew from all the political activities and went to Pondicherry. When he was in Baroda, Muzumdar Wada was the place where Vishnu Bhaskar Lele and Aurobindo meditated in their pursuit of enlightenment. They meditated for 3 days. This enabled him to calm his mind and experience divinity. He termed this state as Nirvana, a state of total mental calm. After coming to Pondicherry in 1910, Aurobindo completely dedicated himself to his spiritual philosophical pursuits. In 1914, after 4 years of intense yoga, he started a monthly philosophical magazine called Arya. At the beginning, there were few followers, but with the time, members grew, resulting in the formation of Aurobindo Ashram in 1926. His close spiritual follower, Mira, came to know later on as the Mother, a French national, came to Pondicherry on 29 March 1914 and finally settled in 1920. After 24 November 1926, Sri Aurobindo retired into seclusion and the Mother built the ashram. His main contribution and main teaching is in the form of integral yoga. His concept of integral yoga is described in his book, The Synthesis of Yoga and the Life Divine. He argues that divine Brahma manifests as empirical reality through Jiva. He argued that the end goal of spiritual practice could not merely be liberation from the world into Samadhi. He would also of the opinion that descent of divine into the world in order to transform it into a divine existence is the main objective of integral yoga. This constituted the purpose of integral yoga. At the center of Aurobindo's metaphysical system is the supermind and an intermediary power between unmanifested Brahma and the manifested world. The integral yoga declares that by the supermind is meant the full truth, consciousness of the divine nature, in which there can be no place for the principle of division and ignorance. It is always a full light and knowledge superior to all mental substance or mental movement. Supermind is the breach between Satchidananda and the lower manifestation, and it is only through the supermental that mind, life and body can be spiritually transformed. The descent of supermind will mean the creation of a supermental race. He wrote his philosophy was formed by the study of Upanishads and Bhagavad Gita. According to Sri Aurobindo, all life is yoga, and he believed politics should be spiritualized. Sri Aurobindo was nominated twice for Nobel Prize without being awarded. First in 1943 for Nobel Award in Literature and in 1950 for Nobel Award in Peace. He left his body on 5th December 1950 in Pondicherry Aurobindo Ashram. Around 60,000 people attended to see his body resting peacefully. Mahayogi Sri Aurobindo, apart from a philosopher, a freedom fighter, a social leader, was a poet. He wrote Savitri, which is an epic poem based upon the theology from Mahabharata. He was writing this epic for many years and completed just before his Mahanirvan. It is a 23,000-line spiritual poem. His other writings include essays on Gita, the life divine, synthesis of yoga, the secret of yoga, the ideal human unity, a defense of Indian culture, the psychology of social development, and many more. Yogi Arvind, as is said, was a strong believer in complete transformation of human into supermind. And he very strongly believed that if one practices his integral yoga, the jiva ascends and the supermind descends, and these two together can erase all the miseries from this world. And so he very strongly believed in a complete transformation of human being. The next philosopher is Bhagwan Shri Raman Maharshi. Raman Maharshi was an Indian Hindu sage and Jivanamukta, liberated being. He was born as Venkatraman Iyer, but is mostly known by the name Bhagwan Shri Raman Maharshi. He was born in Trichuli, Tamil Nadu. He was the second child of 4 children in an Orthodox Hindu Brahmin family. Father was Sundaram Iyer and mother Azagamal. His father was a court pleader. Both his parents, parental uncle, and his father and his father's brother had become sannyasis. He says he used to sleep very deeply, not waking from even loud sounds, not even when his body was bitten by others. When he was about 12 years old, he experienced spontaneous deep meditative states. He says some incomplete practice from the past birth was clinging on me. He was sent to his uncle at Dindigul for education at 11 years of age. His father wanted him to learn English and enter government service. His father died suddenly in February 1892, and after that his family split up. In November 1895, he realized that Arunachal is the sacred mountain and it was a real place for him. In July 1896, at the age of 16, he had a sudden fear of death. He was struck by a flash of excitement or current that seemed to pass him. He initiated the process of self-inquiry, asking himself, what is it that dies? He concluded that the body dies, but the current or the force remains alive, and recognized this current or his self, which latter he identified with personal God or Ishwar. Raman Maharshi later in his life called this death experience as akarma mukti, sudden liberation, as opposed to karma mukti, gradual liberation, as in the Vedanta path of Jnana Yoga. It resulted in a state of mind which he later described as the state of mind of Ishwar or Jnani. After this incident, he lost interest in school, studies, friends, and relations. He preferred to sit alone. Knowing his family would not permit him to become sannyasi, he left his family and slipped away. He boarded a train on 29th August 1896 and reached Tiruvannamalai on 1st September 1896, where he stayed for the rest of his life. He went to the temple of Arunachaleshwar, where he spent first few weeks in the 1000-pillar hall. Then he shifted to another spot and eventually to the Patal Lingam vault cave so that he could remain undisturbed. There he spent days absorbed in deep samadhi. Sheshadri Swamingal, a local saint, discovered him in the underground vault and tried to protect him. In February 1897, he moved to Gurumutam temple. Sadhu Palaniswami went to see him. Palaniswami's first darshan left him filled with peace and bliss. During this time, he completely neglected his body. Gradually, despite his desire for privacy, he started attracting attention from visitors who admired his silence and austerities. A bamboo fence was built to protect him. In February 1899, he left the foothills to live on the Arunachal itself. He stayed in Sadguru cave for a short period before taking up residence in Virupaksha cave for next 17 years. 1902, a government officer, Shiva Prakash Pillai, visited the young Swami in a hope of obtaining answers to the questions about how to know one's true identity. The 14 questions put up to the young Swami and his answers were Raman Maharshi's first teachings on self-inquiry, the method for which he became widely known and were eventually published in English book Who Am I? In 1911, first Westerner, Frank Humphreys, then police officer, discovered him and wrote about him in the International Psyche Gazette in 1913. After this, many scholars, common people visited him for his spiritual instructions. Among them was Sri Ganapati Shastri, scholar in Vedas and Upanishads, who sought guidance from Raman Maharshi on self-inquiry in 1907 and gave him title Bhagwan Sri Raman Maharshi. He gave spiritual instructions by providing darshan and sitting in silence with devotees and visitors, but also answering questions raised by them. Many of these question-answer sessions have been published and some of which edited by Raman Maharshi himself. He explained the concept of self. He considered himself as force or current playing on the body. He called out a personal God, Ishwar. He used many terms to denote self like Satchit Ananda, truth, consciousness, God, Brahma. According to him, there are neither jnanis or ajnanis. There is simply jnana, which is self. He considered the self to be the permanent and enduring, surviving physical death. He advocated silence. His main means of instruction to his devotees in order to remove ignorance and abide in self-awareness was through sitting silently together. According to him, silence is the true Upadesha. It is suited for the most advanced seekers. The others are unable to draw full inspiration from it. Therefore, they require words to explain the truth. But, he said, truth is beyond words. It does not warrant any explanation. Bhagwan Sri Raman Maharshi is known worldwide for his philosophy of self-inquiry, also called Atma Vichar. It is the constant attention to the inner awareness of I or I am. He frequently recommended this as the most efficient and direct way of realizing self-awareness in response to questions on self-liberation and the classical texts on yoga and Vedanta. By paying attention to the I thought, inquiring where it comes from, the I thought will disappear and the self-awareness will appear. This results in an effortless awareness of being and staying with it. With it, this I gradually destroys vasanas, desires. When the vasanas or desires disappear, the mind, vritti, also comes to rest, and finally, the I thought will never rise again, which is self-realization or liberation. Although Bhagwan Sri Raman Maharshi advocated self-inquiry as the fastest means to realization. He also recommended the path of bhakti and self-surrender to one's deity or guru, which would ultimately converge with the path of self-inquiry. Surrender has to be complete and without any expectation of solutions or rewards or even liberation. It is a willingness to accept whatever happens. This practice is aimed at the removal of ignorance, not at the attainment of realization. His words on reincarnation are also very famous. He taught that the idea of reincarnation is based on wrong ideas about the individual self as being real. He would say that rebirth does exist to step forward to those who were not able to fully grasp the non-reality of the individual self. When the identification with the body stops, any notion about death and rebirth become inapplicable, since there is no birth or death within self. Reincarnation exists only so long as there is ignorance. There is really no incarnation at all, either now or before. This is the truth. The few writings he is credited with came into being as answers to questions asked by his disciples or through their urging. Only few hymns were written on his own initiative. In 1901, Self-Inquiry, Vichara Sangram, Answers to Questions was compiled and published in a dialogue form. In 1902, Answers to Questions were compiled in a book, Who Am I? And this book was published in 1923. On his own initiative, he wrote in 1914 5 hymns to Arunachal, a poem. Raman Maharshi Ashram is the home to the modern sage and the Advaita Vedanta master from 1992 until his death in 1950. It is situated at the foot of Arunachal Hill in Tamil Nadu. His Samadhi shrine continues to attract devotees from all over the world. Hundreds of visitors are given accommodation so that they may practice teachings in the vicinity of the sacred shrine. His Mahanirvan. In November 1948, a tiny cancerous lump was found in his arm and was removed in February 1949. But by April 1950, he had become too weak to go to visiting hall and meet visitors. His Mahanirvan was on 14th April 1950 in Ramana Maharshi Ashram. So Bhagwan Sri Ramana Maharshi strongly believed in self-inquiry, Atma Vichar, and silence, Mauna. He answered the questions of the visitors and the followers. And he said he doesn't want any followers as such. Whoever believes, trusts his teachings, they can follow those teachings. So Bhagwan Sri Raman Maharshi, who was with us till 1950, was a great spiritual leader. So we have discussed four philosophers and yogis: Swami Dayananda Saraswati, Swami Vivekananda, Yogi Arvind, and Bhagwan Sri Raman Maharshi. You will find a common thread in the teachings of all of them. The reason being, all of them, they were very strong believers in Vedas and Upanishads. All of them believed in Karmayoga. All of them opposed superstition. All of them, they were social reformers. All of them, they lived for the mankind. All of them, they believed in self-realization for everyone. And all these, they compiled from Vedas, Upanishads, and Bhagavad Gita. For a common man who cannot go or read Vedas and Upanishads or even Bhagavad Gita, for that households or common man, teachings of these four philosophers and yogis in a very simple language and the practical experience that they had in their spiritual life made the households and the common man believe that they also can dream of spiritual upliftment, enlightenment, or self-realization. And that is the contribution of these philosophers to the mankind. So, here I end my session. Hari Om.